Welcome back. In the last video, we prepared this method getBitmap from view, where we just paste a view in and it will return a bitmap. And now we're going to look at how we can store such a bitmap onto our device. And I'm going to create a coroutine therefore. So we need to use the suspend keyword, suspend func, and I'm going to call this method bitmap file. So save bitmap file to be precise. And we need to have a bitmap. So let's add a bitmap nullable here, which will return a string. Okay, so this will be the structure of our suspend function. So first of all, I need to create a variable that will contain the result. So where we're storing the image. And then we need to use with context. And in order to use with context, we need to import with context. So in order to use that, let's go over to our Gradle file and add the dependencies. So here we need to make sure that we add the dependency. So we're in the Gradle file for app, and the dependency that we're going to require is going to be the activity KTX. So here implementation Android X activity activity minus KTX, and we can use the beta, in my case, beta 01. So that version here, and then we need to sync it. Otherwise, we cannot use all of this coroutine stuff. Okay. Once the Gradle is done and the syncing is done, we can go back to the main activity. Okay. In my case, it's done now. Now we can use with context, or we can import with context. So let me just go ahead and rewrite it with context. You can see now I can actually use it. Okay. And then I need to add the thread that I want to run this on. And I'm going to use the dispatchers IO as we have seen in the demo. Okay, dispatchers.io, the input output dispatcher. And we are outputting something, right? We're outputting an image. That's the idea behind this function. So first we check if the bitmap that is given to us, so mbitmap, is not equal null, because only if that's the case, then I want this to run, because we can call this method with an empty bitmap and it will just do nothing, or it will still work in a way. Okay, and then because things can go wrong doing what we're going to do, so storing something using output streams and stuff, we need to use a try block here. So I will create this variable byte, which will be a byte array output stream. So we're outputting an image, which creates a new byte array output stream. The buffer capacity is initially 32 bytes, though its size increases if necessary. So now we can use the bitmap and compress it. So that's a function that bitmaps has, and we need to pass in the format that we want to use, the quality and the output stream. So here, what kind of format do we want to use? Well, we can just use the bitmap compress format. So here, just go ahead and use bitmap compress format. So it's an enum that we can use here, and then I'm going to say I want to use the PNG format. All right, so the image will be stored as a PNG. Then you can say which quality you want to use, and I'm going to say 90, which is 90%, which is a good enough quality, very good quality actually. So you don't want to overdo it, because otherwise the image will just be huge, and I don't think it's necessary for our application. And then I'm just going to pass in the output stream, so byte array output stream. So bytes is how I called it, but you could of course call it differently. And then now that we are compressing it, we need to create a file out of it so that we can store it, because we can now then use the file output stream. So let's create a file, and this will be a file which has a path name, and we can use the external cache directory dot, and let's import file for a second here, or in a second. Okay, so we can get the external cache directory, then the absolute file to string. So this will give us a location where our application is, so to speak. So this is going to be the path name, which we now add something to. Okay, so this is where it will be on our device, so to speak, where we want to store the image. And I'm going to add the file separator to it, which is also a string. So this is the file separator, whatever is used as a file separator, could be a dot or whatever. And then I'm using the name of my application. I'm just going to call this one kids drawing or kids drawing app underscore. So you can call it whatever. This will just be how the file will be called on my system. And then in order to give each image a unique name, I'm just going to add the current time in milliseconds divided by 1000 plus, and then the type dot PNG. Okay. So what will now happen is, well, this is basically going to be the location for the file, and it will create a file item. So we're passing where the location is, and we're saying, okay, I want this file to be stored with the name at this location. And then we can create a file output stream. So file output stream object, and pass our f to it, so our file to it. So now we just need to write. So here, let's use bytes dot 2-byte array. So it will take our byte array output stream and make a byte array out of it, and then we can close it. So overall, we're creating the file output stream, we're writing something, and then we're closing the file output stream and release any system resources associated with this stream. It's really important. And then we get the actual result. So here we can assign the result to be f.absolute path. So the absolute path of the file. So basically where the file is. And now we can run something on the UI thread, because this is a suspend function, right? A coroutine function, which means it will run all of this stuff in the background, which is great. That's exactly how you're supposed to do it. Don't run this resource intensive stuff on the main thread, on the UI thread. But what we do want to run on the UI thread is going to be letting the user know where the file was saved, because it was saved on the result, right? So we can just check if result dot is not empty and is not empty. So if it's not empty, then we want to write a toast, and toast will just be basically saying where the result is. So make text file saved successfully at result. So this is the location where it has been stored for a short period of time. And otherwise, so in the else case, if result is empty, we're going to say that something went wrong saving the file. So another toast here, something went wrong while saving the file. Now, because this all can go wrong, this entire try block, let's go ahead and add a catch block here, which we catch with an exception. And we're just gonna say, in that case, result is going to be an empty string. And we're going to print to the stack trace whatever the error has in store for us. And you see, we still have an error here because we need to return something. And we need to return a string, and luckily enough, result is in fact going to be a string. So here, result will either be empty, so it is empty at the beginning, and in the case that there is an exception, we are really making sure that it's going to be empty. And if there's no exception, and things go right, we're trying to create this file, and on the UI thread, we are also displaying the result. And of course, the result will be the path of the file that we created, so the image that we created. Okay, so now we have this save bitmap file method, we have this get bitmap from view method, and we have only looked at code for over 20 minutes now. So let's go ahead and actually make this run. And in order to make it run, we need to go to the onCreate method, because there I want to use my button, so my save button, and I'm going to call it button save, and it will be the image button save that we created in the last video, which is this image button that has this little save icon. All right, and then of course we need to use the IB save here instead of the IB undo. So let's do that and call a different method in here. So that will be the important part. So what is it that we want to call? Well, we want to call, or basically we we want to execute a coroutine. So what I want to do here is I want to check, can I write to the storage? And let's go over here and see. Okay, we have read external storage, but now let's add users permission, write external storage here as well, like so. And then accordingly, we need to make changes to our permission request here. So we asked for read external storage only, but now we need to ask for the other one as well. Let me check further down where we show the rationale here, where we request storage permission. Okay, so here we have an array of permissions, and you see we have this to do, add writing external storage permission. I added that earlier. Here we need to go ahead and use manifest.permission.write external, or what is it? Write external storage. Yeah, that's it. So how do I now find out if I have the right to read to the storage? And basically in later versions of Android, so in the latest versions of Android, you don't need to ask for read and write permissions at the same time, but we're just making sure that we have both for all the versions. But what we can now do is we can just go ahead and say private fun is read storage allowed, which will return a boolean, which will just let me know if we do have storage reading write or not. So what we can do is we can create a variable which will be the result, and I get it from the context compat check self permission, and I need to pass in the context as well as the permission that I want to check if I have that. And I can just say manifest.permission.read external storage. So this will give me the result, and now I just need to return this result as a boolean. So return result is equal package manager dot permission granted. Okay, so what we're doing here is we are having an if clause, so to speak. So result will be either permission granted or not granted. So it will return a true or false statement. So we're checking for self permission, which will return permission granted or not granted, right? So static int, which returns an integer, and permission granted, what is the integer for that? You see the permission granted integer is 0. So if we get 0 as a response from this method call here, where we check whether we have external reading storage permission, then result will be 0, and permission granted is also 0, so it will return true. Otherwise, it will return false. So now we can check if we have write, or the right to read from the storage, which also gives us the right to write to the storage in the latest Android Studio versions and the Android versions. So here we can just check if is read storage allowed. And if that's the case, then I want to launch my lifecycle scope. So basically my coroutine launch like so. And we need to import lifecycle scope here. Let's do that. We need to import launch, and both of them will be added here. Import lifecycle scope, launch, dispatchers, and with context. So all of these here are the coroutine related imports. Okay, so just make sure that you have them. And also, if you don't understand what's up here, definitely check out the coroutines demo that I created a couple of lectures before. So we can now get the image from our view. So what view does have the image? So what is the view that contains all of the graphics that we have in here? Well, let's look at it. So we need to go over to our frame layout, and you can see that our frame layout here exists of an image view and a drawing view. And the drawing view is our self-created view that we have built, right? This class, which contains all of the drawing that we did ourselves. And then it contains the image that we have as the background. So what we want to do is we want to get this frame layout, which is itself also a view. We want to get that, and we want to sandwich it. So put those two things together, the image view and whatever we drew, and we want to store it. because that's what all of the methods that we created were for, right? So our get bitmap from view, it takes a view, and for example, we could pass in the frame layout here, and then it saves it to the, well, it saves this bitmap that is created from this view. You see here, it creates a bitmap. We're passing it to the save bitmap file, and this method then saves it in the background. So let's put all of this together because this is quite advanced stuff, I'd say. So let's use our FL drawing view, and like so, drawing view, which is a frame layout. So we need to import frame layout here for this to work. So import frame layout like so, and then we can find it by its ID, r.id.fl drawing view container. That's how we call this frame layout, right? This frame layout here, which contains the view and everything, is going to be the right item that we want to have, because now what we can do with this FL drawing view, we can pass it to our save bitmap file get bitmap from view call. So what I'm doing here is I'm calling this method, which will return a bitmap, and then I'm passing this bitmap to save bitmap from file. Of course, you could have gone ahead and said my bitmap is of type bitmap is equal to, and then put this here in there, and then pass the my bitmap variable. That would have been fine as well if you want to put it into 2 lines. But of course, you can also just go ahead and do it in 1 line, and you don't need this line here. Okay, so let's test this. It's the moment of truth, a bunch of code that we had set up. Let's see if we can actually store the image onto our device. Okay, so let me draw something, save, and you see this is where it was stored. So once again, storage emulated 0 Android data.com. So it's all of this stuff that we have here, like super long path here. External cache directory, absolute file to a string, then the file separator, and then kit drawing app. So once again, just quickly, you see it says kit's drawing app. So here it didn't even say kit drawing app because it was still doing all of this part. So it's quite a long path. All right, now how do we get to the image? Well, we need to go to files, and then here SDK Android data, and then select the path of our application. So com direct kit's drawing app cache, and that's where it stored all of those images. So let's go back to the application, and not the Photos app, but to our drawing app. And then let me select a different image. Here, let me select Homer. Like so, okay. Then let me draw something on top of his head, and then save this and go over to the cache folder, and we will find our Homer Simpson with this little bubble around his head. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So now you know how to store your image onto your device. All right, so see you in the next video.